Senior military analyst James Stavridis joins me now. He is the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. Good to have you back, sir.
Great to be with you, Jim.
I wonder, first I want to ask you, before we get to the ceasefire negotiations, about the NATO alliance, because you have the NATO Secretary General there praising NATO allies for contributing more to their defense. But when you hear the public comments of NATO leaders in Europe, they say that's in part because they don't trust the U.S. anymore to take part in the alliance, to live up to its Article 5 commitment in the alliance. What do you see from Europe here? Do you see Europe stepping up to U.S. demands or saying we need to be able to go it alone without the U.S.?
I think it's going to be door number two, Jim. Increasingly, the Europeans are having an aha moment. And it's part of it is certainly the pressure from the Trump administration. But let's face it, it's the Vladimir Putin, it's Russian tanks rolling west. Europeans remember the Red Army raping its way across Poland and Germany. They remember Prague. They remember Budapest, where Russian tanks rolled in and crushed revolutions. This is within living memory of Europeans. So I think they feel they can't depend on the U.S. They're going to step up. You're going to see them throw enormous amounts of money at their defense, and I applaud them doing so.
Yeah. It may be a necessity. Let's talk now about these negotiations. So Putin says, well, it's great and correct, this ceasefire proposal, but I have some reservations. Do you, having followed Putin for some time yourself, do you believe he is seriously considering agreeing to a ceasefire?
I think having tracked Vladimir Putin for close to 20 years, including when I was Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, I think he's doing classic Putin, which is kind of, to put an American expression on it, rope-a-dope. He is going to take a couple of punches. He's going to bounce back. He's going to press forward. By the way, you got to love that Russian military look where they look up in the air when the great leader goes by. It's so strange. I've been watching that for 20 years as well. Putin, if you put it on a scale, Jim, between niet, no, and da, yes, he's kind of right in the middle where you'd expect it. He's looking for further concessions from the Ukrainians. And I'll tell you the three things he wants. He wants a guarantee that Ukraine will never, ever join NATO. Number two, he wants the world to recognize Russian sovereignty in Crimea and the 4 provinces of Donbass, the land bridge. And number three, he is going to press for elections in Ukraine because he desperately wants to get rid of Volodymyr Zelensky, who's been a real thorn in his side.
The trouble is, several of those things you mentioned, certainly NATO membership and the possibility of new elections, are also things the U.S. president or some of his allies have talked about quite publicly. And they've even repeated some of the Kremlin talking points on the root causes of the crisis here, blaming, in effect, Ukraine and Europe as opposed to Russia. Does that mean that Trump and the U.S. cannot be reliable mediators in this negotiation? Do you see President Trump as perhaps trending towards Putin's view of this war and therefore delivering an agreement that leans in that direction?
I think at this point, what I see the administration doing is accepting the de facto positions of the combatants right now. And that, I think, frankly, is a military reality. The idea that Ukraine can ultimately throw Russia out of Crimea and the Donbass is very, very difficult. Maybe not mission impossible. It's mission really, really hard. So I think what the Trump team is doing is accept what we got, go for a Korean War-like ending, push for peacekeepers of some kind to create a no-fire zone between the combatants. And in order to get Putin to agree to that, Team Trump is going to have to put some real pressure on Russia, both sotto voce, kind of off camera, but also very publicly. And it remains to be seen whether Team Trump is willing to do that or not. Everyone is watching.
Yeah, they were certainly willing to put an enormous amount of pressure on Ukraine and its president, as we witnessed. James Stavridis, always good to have you.
Thank you, Jim.